Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us today, February 14th. Something big is happening today for our webinar on strategies to accelerate electric micromobility. We have a great discussion prepared for you today. Our speakers will discuss strategies to create an economical ecosystem of transportation. My name is Simbiat Yusuf. I am the event manager at Fourth. And before I pass it on to our moderator, we have a few updates from the Fourth team. Attendees, we ask that you submit any questions you have via the attendee chat. We will go through those during the Q&A portion of the webinar. And I'm seeing some folks can't hear me, but we will work on that shortly. We will also be sharing the webinar recording as well as the webinar slideshow after the webinar. And for some of you that are new to Fourth, who are we? Fourth is on a mission to electrify transportation. We bring people together to create solutions that will reduce pollution and barriers to access in an equitable manner. Our team is focused in 5 areas, which are access to cars, access to charging, access to emerging modes, policy, and event in partnership. And the work we do would not be possible without the membership and the sponsorship. If you're interested in sponsorship or membership at Fourth, you can reach out to myself currently. We will be introducing our new partnerships and if I'm manager Rachel Avercamp shortly, but you can still reach out to me for any sponsorship opportunities. We love to talk to folks about how we can share what they're working on and how we can promote their work. And wouldn't you like to be a part of the Fourth team or share with your network that Fourth is hiring? We currently have 4 positions open. We have an accounting associate, deputy director, senior program manager under the access to charging team, and a program manager as well under the access to charging team. If you or someone in your network would be interested in this, we will share this information in the webinar recap. And we are now accepting applications for the Mobility for All Scholarship at the Roadmap Conference. The Mobility for All Scholarship is live and we will be accepting submissions until Friday, March 10th, 2023. The Mobility for All Scholarship is sponsored this year by Pacific Power and Resource Innovations. The Mobility for All Scholarship also provides a complimentary ticket and a travel stipend to individuals from community based organizations who are working to make clean transportation accessible in historically underserved communities and communities of color. If you have any questions about the Mobility for All Scholarship or in general about the Roadmap Conference, whether that is sponsorship or registration for attendees, you can reach out to myself or you can go on our website at roadmapfort.org. And with that, I will pass it along to our moderator today, Adrian Gomez, our Senior Program Manager under the Access to Emerging Modes team. Adrian?
Thank you, Simbi. Good morning, everyone. Thank you all for joining us here today. And as Simbi said, my name is Adrian Gomez, and I'll be your moderator today. And I am the Senior Program Manager for our Access to Emerging Modes focus area, which houses our electric micromobility work. And so before I introduce the panelists, I just want to bring awareness to a recently released Oregon Department of Transportation's Transportation Electrification Infrastructure Needs Analysis. That's a mouthful. The TINA supplemental report that Fourth contributed to. So this report focuses on the state of electric micromobility in Oregon and looks at recommendations to increase electric micromobility adoption in the state. The link has been shared with everyone. So yeah, I would say check that out. There's a lot of good information and recommendations there. So now I'm going to move on to introducing our panelists. I'm going to ask our panelists to turn their cameras on. Um, so wait for There we go. Thank you all. So up first we have Nick Wood. His pronouns are he, his. He's a program manager for Vivo. And so Nick has been a lifelong cycle commuter. Most of his 20 plus years in and around the cycling industry have been spent supporting transportation slash utility riding. While managing a shop in 2010, he saw firsthand the power of e-bike technology to welcome new riders into the bike lane as early adopters were able to replace car trips while gaining fitness. Then we also have Rachel Hotin, who's the Sustainable Transportation Director for Bicycle Colorado. So Rachel brings a strong background in policy and environmental issues to ensure Colorado's state and regional agencies lead the nation in sustainable transportation investments by reducing car dependency and creating safe options for people to ride, walk, and take transit. Rachel also served as an elected official on the Wheat Ridge City Council. And then finally, we have Laura Maloney, Membership and Engagement Director at NABSA. Laura joined the NABSA team in 2021 and brought with her experience in community organizing, marketing, communications, project management, and event planning. And so before joining the NABSA team, she launched the dynamic young adult community in Madison, Wisconsin. She's passionate about bringing people together, creating educational opportunities, and facilitating collaboration. So let's welcome our panel here today. And so before we dive into all the neat stuff that we're going to talk about today, we do have an icebreaker. So you can go ahead and submit your answers on the chat. So our icebreaker today is: how do you use micromobility as a form of transportation? How would you like to see micromobility utilized within your community? So I'll ask our panelists to feel free to share if they would like, as the rest of the audience shares their answers in the chat box.
I'm happy to share. Laura Maloney here. I am a resident of downtown Madison, Wisconsin, and there is shared micromobility here, electric bikes that I use for getting to the office, getting to the grocery store, running errands, all the things. The frequency of my car use is very limited. And to answer the second part of the question, I am super passionate about getting micromobility to be more broadly and continue to be broadly considered part of the transportation ecosystem.
Thank you, Laura. Nick, Rachel?
I'll go. Well, I ride to commute most of the time via e-bike, and that's a pretty key technology for me to enable the commute as I'm going over a small mountain on my 10-mile commute. So I've got a 1,000-foot climb on the way home, and the realities of life with a couple kids in school and having to pick them up and shuttle them around. It's just so much easier to be on time when you're riding an e-bike. And that's, a plus over both auto use, over driving in traffic, and over, riding a regular bike where some days you're just too tired. What I'd like to see in my community is a little bit more investment in the network. I live between two cities, between Portland and Beaverton, and stuff sort of falls off as you get into this weird suburban zone. And so it'd be great to see some more investment in connecting the routes that exist within these cities to the kind of weird suburban spots that some of us end up living in.
Great. Thank you, Nick. Rachel?
Yeah, I don't have much new to add to what either Laura or Nick said, just a lot of a ditto to that. I personally ride my e-bike for transportation, and it's increasingly important to have that regional connectivity, because I don't just ride it around like the 2 miles around my house. I'm riding it further distances to literally displace my car trips. So investing in that network. But I think the one thing maybe I could add that's really important that we need to do more of, that kind of builds on what Laura said, is we really need to elevate the e-bike as a component of the transportation system, not as alternative. but as the leading way for our transportation system to work. So that's in part a cultural thing about not othering the e-bike, but really recognizing it's a form of transportation. And with that recognition, what are the investments that need to follow to make it work for them? Because we've been doing that for 100 years for the car, and that era is increasingly in the rearview mirror. And on the road ahead, it's e-bikes. So would love to see the investments in that.
Great. Thank you, Rachel. Thank you, everyone, for sharing your responses in the chat box. So to kick us off, we have Nick from VVolt. So Nick, go ahead and take it away.
All right, I think I'm unmuted now. For those of you who don't know, VVolt is an e-bike and electric micromobility brand based in Portland, Oregon. We launched our debut line of e-bikes in 2021 and have been growing since. We really see ourselves foundationally as a transportation brand, first and foremost. At the moment, we focus on electric bikes, trying to make them easy to use and low maintenance. Gives people a similar experience to auto use, right? Everyone can use anything. Once you know how to use one, the others are just as easy. And with all of this, we really try and center our transportation goals over any sort of recreation within our marketing, because we really do see that this is key to just hammer the point again that e-bikes are transportation for so many folks. So when we look at how to accelerate this future where e-bikes are one of the default modes of transportation, we see that investment in purchase incentive for electric bikes, on-street infrastructure, and better funding for programs like bike share and e-bike libraries are all three really important things that as advocates we should all be pushing. This allows riders to really experience the magic of micromobility and lowering the barrier to entry all around. So, e-bikes are the transformational technology, but the really great thing is that it's not based entirely on new technology. This is just an added layer on the bicycle, which, talking about how we've invested in the streets, bicycles were the first vehicle for which we started to pave roads, well over 100 years ago. So let's turn back to, some of our initial looks at how to invest in our street networks and make them work for bikes again. So we look at incentives as having a really important impact. For purchase incentives, only a few $100s can really make a big impact. More per rider can democratize access, with allowing folks to have better access to vehicles like cargo bikes. And we really look at Denver's tiered incentive as having more momentum to really displace auto use because you're putting multi-rider vehicles on the street. So what do we see as some of the best ways to maximize the impact of these incentive programs? I'm going to call out a few things that we see as generally good practice and that we've discussed here in Oregon with the folks who are crafting the bill that is now hopefully continuing to move its way through our state house. We see that the best programs are those that will provide higher rebate amounts for lower income riders. We also see that tiered funding is a good idea to democratize this. We don't, as a brand, we don't have a real stance yet on some of the nitty gritty of this, whether it's 60% for low income and 40% uncapped. It's just all good using some of these strategies. We also see set asides for or higher rebates for e-cargo bikes as really important. Again, these are some of the most effective auto replacers on the market, and moving more families into those at all levels really stands to have a significant impact. I guess looking out to the future, we see that as mode shift occurs, incentive programs could shift to 100% targeting for lower income riders. But right now, we have a climate emergency and we have opposition for citizens and groups who see this as a recreational vehicle giveaway. You know, don't incentivize mountain bikes is something we hear often, but we see that as just a non-starter, right? We don't talk about whether an EV incentive can cover a truck or an SUV that's marketed as an off-road vehicle. At the end of the day, all of these things are used mostly on road. And if it's used for transportation, great. We don't care really what it looks like. What we see as not so great in some of the program design, income caps. We see that wealthier communities often have better bike infrastructure. And again, with a lens toward reducing vehicle miles traveled right now, reducing greenhouse gas right now, these are the people who have the infrastructure to go and utilize this vehicle. So providing some access to folks all the way up the income scale. Do they need it? No. Will they use it? Yes. And that is really key. So on that kind of same track, we see that price caps on e-bikes are not a great idea. We've seen $3,000, $4,000 price caps thrown out in various purchase incentive programs, and that limits access to folks, especially if those programs tie into purchasing through a bike shop, where if you go back a couple of years, most bike shops didn't even have an e-bike on the floor, sub $3,000. They're now working to broaden their offering and bringing in some, greater diversity of options. But again, capping the price of the vehicle, we just don't see as a good solution. Most people aren't going to be buying a $10,000 luxury e-bike. And especially when we look to cargo e-bikes, there's really a huge price gap between the entry-level stuff around $2,000 and then jumping up to more premium options like the Turns at $6,000 plus for kind of mid-range stuff there. And that kind of moves us into the discussion of point of purchase requirements. We're a primarily direct-to-consumer bike company, so obviously we have a little bit of a horse in this race, but generally speaking, we see that flattening access to this works at where you're driving your purchase as well. I was in a working group for the California rebate and listened to somebody who lives in the Northern Sierra. She bought her e-bike years ago and assembled it herself. She identified herself as not a handy person, but she was able to buy online and use this bike for years to replace transportation. And she specifically called out that she was an elderly person, not much of a driver, living in a community 2 hours away from the nearest bike shop. So online purchase access really was a key thing for accessibility for her. So that's some of the good and some of the bad in terms of program design, and then some of the side benefits that we see coming down the road as well. One of the big ones for us as a brand is that we see that incentivization of vehicle purchase specifically, so not just network investment, not an investment in other points of access. This can really help the US market mature. If you look at the US market versus the EU market, generally speaking, riders there are comfortable spending more on higher end electric bikes because it's really seen as a form of transportation there. And part of that's because they've invested at a state level, at a city level, in infrastructure and in subsidizing vehicle purchase. So as ridership grows, we should see more riders putting miles and probably buying up on their next bike and moving that starter bike into the secondary market more rapidly, which is yet another benefit of having this purchase incentive, is really growing that secondary market and rewarding brands that put value in the initial build of the bike, making that something that's going to hold its value longer, and making for, ultimately, we think, higher quality, safer vehicles on the road. We know there's a lot of discussion right now about battery safety, about higher quality brake safety on electric bikes. And this sort of incentivization is the precise sort of action in tandem potentially with regulation that can drive the market to provide better, more reliable, higher end transportation options. I do think it's worth calling out that all the images on this slide are concepts that have been presented into the EU in the last year or so. And one is attached to Volkswagen, another is from the big brand Decathlon, which is a multi-sport retailer. These big brands are investing in producing transportation bikes, and these are just at the concept phase right now, but we expect to see more of that. And this hinges on historical investment in the network and in the vehicles. So we hope to see more of that as we go forward. And thank you to Adrian and Symbiont for helping me present today.
Thank you, Nick. I appreciate it. So yeah, if you all have any questions, please submit them in the attendee chat. And up next is Rachel, so I'll turn it over to you, Rachel.
Wonderful. Thank you, Adrian. And thank you, Nick, for all that inspiring information. More e-bikes, more better. So as you heard earlier, I'm Rachel Haltine. I'm the Director of Sustainable Transportation at Bicycle Colorado. And I'm excited to share a little bit more about how Colorado is leading the nation by solving problems with e-bikes. Bicycle Colorado has been leading the state for 30 years, trying to make sure that it is a place where everyone who wants to ride a bike feels like it's safe and accessible, and maybe even really enjoyable. We think getting on a bike is a lot of fun. So my job, as you heard earlier, is to make sure that state and regional agencies are spending money to make sure that we're reducing greenhouse gas emissions through transportation. And it seems obvious to everyone in this space that e-bikes is a great way of accomplishing that. I like to say every time you see a person riding an e-bike, you're seeing someone who is a solution to our most pressing and urgent problems. And that's easy to say, but it's a little bit harder to pinpoint what are those problems. So the problems that we feel e-bikes are solving is, one, they're saving the planet by displacing car trips with bike trips. They're saving money for people who can't afford to drive a car. We feel they're an equitable transportation option. E-bikes are saving mental health and wellness by making it easier and more pleasurable to ride a bike, regardless of age and ability. And e-bikes are saving places by offsetting the cost burden of housing. A lot of times people need to move far away from where they live because of housing costs. And then it makes transportation costs even higher. So e-bikes are a great solution. So what's Bicycle Colorado doing? Well, one of the most important things we're doing right now is just telling the story about the who, why, where of e-bike ridership. And I'd like to share just a couple minutes of a video we recently had made because other people tell their stories better than I do. So do you mind starting the video for me?
From city streets to regional trails, it's hard to ignore the rise of e-bikes. Colorado is proud to lead the nation in investments to make e-bikes more accessible for people and businesses who want healthy, climate-friendly transportation. Bicycle Colorado worked with state and local agencies to help develop programs like the Denver Climate Action Office program that will distribute 4,500 bikes this year, and the Colorado Energy Office program upcoming that will distribute $12 million in e-bike rebates. Let's learn how some of those investments are making a difference for Coloradans.
My name is Frida Mitchell. I live in Denver, Colorado, and my e-bike, I love my e-bike.
My name is Chris. I live in Southwest Denver, and I ride an e-cargo bike. Last year, my commute went from 6 miles to 20 miles, and this really makes it easy to ride in and commute every day.
My name's Jamie. I'm the program director at Denver Food Rescue, and today I'm riding our Yuba Supercargo electric bike, which we use for moving food around the Denver metro area.
Yo soy Julie González y es un honor y placer ser dueña de esta bicicleta electrónica que se llama Cereza.
My name is Darnell Robinson. I work at Sprouts Farmers Market retail. I work in the dairy department, and this is my e-bike. Gets me where I need to go every day I need it.
My name's Alex. I ride a Turn HSD e-cargo bike. My name is Strother Gaines. Pronouns are he, him. I ride a REI co-op e-bike.
My name is Matt. My daughter and I are able to ride to school every morning, and I pick her up every day.
My name's Rachel, and I ride a Class 3 V-Volt that I affectionately have named the Martian Lander.
So we like to go school downtown, pick my son up, and then we go back home. But we also like to take the bike. We start exploring different playgrounds in the neighborhoods. He loves to go to Target. We go to the grocery store and small errands, friends' houses, things like that.
I use the e-bike every day. The only days I wouldn't use it if the weather is really bad.
I like to ride to work, from work, really just making small errands as I make my way through the day. I had to carry everything on my back, and so having the space for cargo with groceries or at the hardware store, that makes a big difference.
Our volunteers move food mainly using bicycles with attached trailers. Every weekend, our volunteers ride hundreds of miles with these bikes.
I work 2.5 miles from my home. I live on the north side of Denver. I work at the state capitol. I'm a state senator. And to be able to actually ride my e-bike, and it's actually faster to get there on my e-bike than it is for me to drive in.
Some of the places that I ride to are the Auraria campus every morning, to the grocery store, and then just cruising around. Honestly, I just ride. In the 5 weeks I've been riding, I've put 800 miles on it.
My hope right now is to commute at least 2 out of 4 days a week to school.
I ride it to go to work, run errands, and just to get around my town. I love it.
Stay safe, wear your helmet, learn your turn signals with your hands, keep your lights on in the early mornings and the late at nights. We still follow some traffic laws, so look up on that and you'll have a good time.
The weight loss. I lost 20 pounds, so I love the e-bike. Get on the bike, you will lose 20 pounds because I did it, and you'll love it, you'll love it.
Actually, having this e-bike gives me a lot of freedom and mobility in ways that I hadn't really anticipated. If I can ride my bike, it changes my whole mood and outlook for the day.
It's the best investment I've ever made in my life.
You'll find that you just get to ride more, and you'll enjoy riding more, and people will look at you and wish they were riding an e-bike too.
We got a $900 rebate, and that was just enough to make me pull the trigger.
Yes, it saves me so much money. We're talking thousands of dollars. If I didn't have the e-bike, I'd most likely be paying upwards of $20 to $30 on Uber or Lyft, RTD, just to get from one place to another.
Let us continue to have other states follow us.
That $900 made.
Fantastic, thank you. I hope everyone found that video as inspiring as I do. Not sure what slide this is. Here we go. Okay, so I am now going to I have a lot of text in the slides that are coming up, and I just would really love to have you guys have most of the information for reference. But I'm going to highlight on a couple things Denver and the state's doing to make sure we get more butts on e-bikes. The first thing is Denver really led the country with its e-bike rebate program that started last year. It is in its second year, and they provide $400 point of sale rebates for for most anyone who gets it, and then $1,200 for income qualified, plus $500 extra for cargo bikes. What I love about this program is the data that we're starting to get now that it's a year in. They've spent about $4.7 million on it. And what we're excited to see is the data about how many vehicle miles it's replacing. Right now, every week, about 100,000 miles, vehicle miles are being replaced by e-bike. And by the end of this year, super whoa. By the end of this year, weekly, that'll be 250,000 miles in Denver area. But we're not just sticking with it in Denver. The whole state's trying to figure out how to get there. You don't get to big impact without actually having a policy roadmap. I just want to make note here that in 2019, our governor said we need to address our climate issues by reducing pollution and greenhouse gas reduction. That's led to state agencies taking really meaningful action, including our DOT and our Colorado Energy Office, which got through the legislature last year $12 million in e-bike programs. I'm going to talk a little bit more about those. SB 22-193 was the bill that came through. Here you can see all the good things that it can fund. The two things we're most excited about are the $2 million for the e-bike grant program for community access, and then $10 million for point of sale consumer direct for low and income qualifying people in the state of Colorado. So what does that look like? Well, it's 2 years, fiscal year 23 and 24. The $10 million rebates will hopefully launch this summer. Bicycle Colorado is lucky to be working with the Energy Office to make that successful. They also are doing 2 rounds of about $1 million worth of community grants. The first round of grants have been identified for 7 communities across Colorado. And these are programs that either introduce or scale up e-bike libraries, or actually have e-bike credits or e-bike free e-bikes for people who qualify in their communities. So keep your eye on that. I'm not going to go through these 2 specifically, but one of our state utility companies is supporting its subsidiaries to provide local e-bike rebates. We love this because it's scaling at the local level, and we think it's coming from the right place. We love to see our utilities being part of the solution to electrify our transportation system. Last year, we were really excited. Our governor, who clearly loves e-bikes, declared September 21st Colorado e-bike day. We think it was the first of its kind in the nation, and we're looking forward to celebrating again this year. All right, so we've accomplished a lot. What's next? I mean, how could we even do more? Well, a lot of the success is in actually trying to figure out how to measure impact of e-bikes. So Bicycle Colorado is working with Streetlight Data, People for Bikes, our DOT, and other partners to try to figure out how to better capture e-bikes and metadata like Streetlight. Really hard because e-bikes actually look like cars because they act like cars. They are transportation. So we're trying to figure out algorithms to better capture e-bike usership in Streetlight Data. Our governor has included another round of of rebates for e-bikes in his budget. He hasn't introduced it to the legislature this year, but any day we're hoping to see that. And it would be eligible for anyone in Colorado, $500 tax rebate for anyone, and then $1,000 for income qualifying. We think it's going to be about another $10 million a year for e-bikes. 7 jurisdictions are expected to offer new local e-bike rebate programs in our state. And then Bicycle Colorado in about 10 days is launching a year-long campaign, Year of the E-Bike, in which we're elevating the stories of the who, where, why of e-bike riders, as well as providing advocacy toolkits so people across the state can work with their local, regional, and state representatives to get more butts on bikes. So with that, I just want to thank you guys for buckling up and staying on the saddle with me for learning more about how Colorado is leading the nation in e-bikes. Thank you so much.
Great, thank you, Rachel. And again, any questions you may have, submit them through the chat box, and yeah, we'll be answering some of those at the end of Laura's presentation. So Laura, you're up next.
Excellent. Thank you, Rachel, for all that information, and Nick, the information you also provided. I'm going to take a little bit different slice of this conversation. So I work with NABSA. For those of you who don't know, we are the North American Bike Share and Scooter Share Association. And we are a nonprofit organization dedicated to providing resources, education, advocacy for the shared micromobility industry. When I say shared micromobility industry, I'm talking about shared bikes and e-scooters. We want to create spaces for industry, public, private, and nonprofit sectors to convene, empower each other. We collaborate across sectors to grow shared micromobility and its benefits to communities, creating a more equitable and sustainable transportation ecosystem. Each year, we produce a shared micromobility state of the industry report. What this report does is it reflects on it's the only report of its kind, and it's tracking trends, growth, and successes of shared micromobility across North America, including Canada and Mexico. So I'm going to go through some stats that you might have seen in our 2021 State of the Industry report that reflects on where we are as a shared micromobility industry, and then touching on some points on electrification and what we're experiencing within the shared micromobility space. So for context, Shared micromobility in North America. In 2021, it's an estimated that 298 cities had at least one bike share and e-scooter system, and 97 had both. So you'll see the map there, and then also a breakdown of the programs across North America. Some of the trip trends that we see is North America shared micromobility riders took 128 million trips across 232,000 vehicles. This resulted in 15.5 million hours of additional physical activity. It offset 54 million pounds of CO2 emissions when comparing trips alone. And then 37% of shared micromobility trips replace a car trip. There's some graphics on the side. I'm not going to directly go through these, but I encourage you to take a look at them as a resource. So when we're talking about electric shared micromobility, I want to reflect on some trends here. So in our 2021 report, it was reported that e-scooters increased significantly during 2021 and is now 57% of the shared micromobility fleet. E-bikes were ridden approximately 36% more than regular pedal bikes, and the number of e-bike trips increased 168% from 2019 to 2021. You'll also note, if you look over on the right side of this slide, is the percentage of bike share systems deploying e-bikes. In 2019, 28% were deploying e-bikes, 44% in 2020. In 2021, it was 50%. And when we release our 2022 report later this year, we anticipate seeing that number continue to increase. So the theme here is electric shared micromobility is following the trends of overall electric micromobility and getting people on electric vehicles. One of the things that I'm excited about that shared micromobility does is getting more people on bikes, getting more people riding shared micromobility vehicles. And so taking a moment to look at what some systems are doing to get more people riding. Shared micromobility systems offer a range of equity programs. So there's discount programs, alternative payment options, education outreach programs, geographic distribution policies for shared micromobility, equitable hiring, and then there are systems that offer adaptive vehicles. You'll also notice in this slide that shared micromobility providers continue to offer heavily discounted access for low-income and other qualified individuals. And this is an important piece of getting people making shared micromobility, making micromobility options available to people as a transportation option. And then looking at shared micromobility as public transportation. During our icebreaker, that was one of our questions, is what needs to happen to help move things forward? And shared micromobility as public transportation is it is continuing to be part of the public transportation ecosystem. So 63% of riders reported that use shared micromobility to connect to transit. 19% say they use it weekly to connect to transit. And then 18% of all shared micromobility trips were for the purpose of connecting to transit. Now, just for broader context, when we're talking about the diversity of vehicles, some of them are like standard pedal bikes, and per the slide previously, we'll note that there are a significant number of systems that are launching e-bikes or incorporating e-bikes into their bike share programs. One of the other exciting things to note when we start thinking about shared micromobility as public transportation is we take a look at what transit agencies are doing. And here's some examples. Some of the ones that pop out are taking a look at the transit agency roles. 54% of the transit agencies that we talk to are involved in station and hub planning. So station and hub planning, that could be locating shared micromobility devices next to bus stops or other transportation hubs. There's also support in grant writing and funding applications. When we look at transit integration, so we talk about transit integration in the shared micromobility space, and often we think of that as payment. How can you pay for shared micromobility and have it also work for transit like a train or bus? However, it's so much more broad than that. There's a lot of systems that are co-marketing, they're co-promoting shared micromobility. They're 35% are receiving information through data sharing agreements, which then can lead to offering in-app trip planning. So imagine having the opportunity to hop on, let's say, an e-bike to get to a transportation hub where you might be taking a longer trip. Those are exciting things that we're experiencing within the industry, and overall, really anticipate seeing the trend increase with shared micromobility as public transportation and the increase in electric bikes across the industry. And just reiterating, because I know I offer a little bit different slice of the electric micromobility conversation, is the North American Bike Share and Scooter Share Association. We represent cities, bike share and scooter share operators, data aggregators, and really what we're hoping to do is bring people together so we can move the needle forward in terms of funding and advocacy and different opportunities to help shared micromobility be integrated into the transportation ecosystem. And here's our contact information if you have additional questions or want to get in touch. Thanks.
Laura, thank you so much. Alrighty, also we are at the Q&A session of our webinar today. We do have quite a bit of questions. We'll try to get through the ones that we have here, but can't make any promises because there's some good ones, and I think they're going to spark some really good conversations. Let's wait for our panelists to get all their cameras on. We have Nick loading in. Perfect. Great. So I'm going to go ahead and just start reading some of these questions. So in regards to Denver's program, Denver is getting rid of the higher rebate for cargo bikes due to usage patterns. And I'm currently working on a tool to help cities and analysis e-bike potential and speak frequently to Denver. I was wondering if their shift away from more money to cargo bikes might impact other programs, since Denver is a leading example of these rebate programs. And Rachel, I believe that this might be directed at you.
Yeah, thank you. So just full disclosure, I really track more at the state level what's happening. So I'm not as granularly familiar with Denver's program because we have a whole department within Bicycle Colorado that looks at Denver. But I think it goes without saying that, you know, one of the leading e-bike rebate programs, their decisions would influence others. I know right now the governor's office is not considering cargo bikes as an additional discount or rebate for e-bikes. So I think we're starting to see that kind of resonate out in other places. I will say, having worked with the Colorado Energy Office on their community e-bike grant program, we have a lot of mountain communities, and when we're really trying to displace cars with e-bikes, then the cargo bikes are a really important component. And we worked with those the communities that submitted grants to actually encourage them to expand. Cargo bikes is one of the options. So I think what you see is some complexity around managing a large scale program, which is individual e-bike rebates being made available like at the state or city level. That creates some complications versus how are we encouraging it through community grant programs. So yeah, I think it goes without saying that it will resonate, but I think it's really important to still encourage the cargo bikes because they, are a huge solution to replacing cars. So we'd like to try and continue to figure out how to keep cargo bikes in the mix.
Great. Thank you, Rachel. I've got a question here for Laura. So there are so many new micromobility devices emerging, scooters that look like bikes, one-wheeled contraptions, Segway-like things. How do you capture all of this in your advocacy? Is there language or terms we should be using? And they go on to say this is an issue when we discuss updating our city regulations.
Yeah, that's an excellent question. So, yes, there are a large number of different micromobility devices coming into the space. And to clarify, when I'm talking about shared micromobility, we are specifically talking about e-bikes, e-scooters, and pedal bikes. So I think the language that we like to use is we're talking about using it in a bike lane, and we don't recommend. We're specifically talking about if it fits in a bike lane, that's what we're working on. And taking a look at reflecting on the shared micromobility industry. When I started my career with bike share, it was bike share. It was in 2013. People didn't know what bike share was. I remember explaining to people what bike share is. Now you have programs like Divvy, who now have bikes and scooters that are parked in docks, which is pretty groundbreaking. It's exciting things we're seeing there. So I think the language that we directly use is looking at if it fits in a bike lane. Those are the things we're working on. I could probably talk more, so this might be one that we would have to take offline for some guidance for language in updating your policies.
Great. Thank you so much, Laura. Nick, I've got one teed up for you. So how do we ensure that e-bikes are compatible with pedal bikes and bike lanes? Speed difference could be a problem. I think, Nick, you are on mute.
How about try now? It comes down partly to rider education. We point folks towards People for Bikes in terms of understanding their local regulations and where they can ride. Because, for example, multi-use paths are a constant point of conflict, and the regulations do differ from state to state and locality to locality. Just encouraging people to brush up on their regulations, we think, is important. Zooming out a little bit, we think that adding more people to the bike lane ideally should result in some pressure to expand bike lanes. So you expand system offerings, and even crazy implementations, like doubled up bike lanes, right? You could in the future see a situation where you had a high speed or high occupancy type lane next to a more conventional bike lane. But at the end of the day, I think that we encourage folks to ride politely and hope that, one of the interactions that we see on bikes and e-bikes is that it's a more human scale of transportation, right? If if you cut somebody off and they yell at you, it's just less likely to be this really aggressive interaction. So some of this will filter out. Some of it may take some regulation, particularly of like non-class conforming e-bikes. We do see like 45 mile an hour e-scooter moped type things as potentially problematic. Technically, they would require licensure, and we encourage that. So we see that a little more enforcement at some level might be handy, especially in areas where you do see more and more conflict happening within the bike lanes.
Great. Thank you, Nick. So I've got one here for all three of you. So what is the better strategy? Promote individual ownership of e-bikes or shared e-bikes? And which factors to consider in the decision?
I'm happy to go first on that one because I would say, you know, both and. I am an individual like micromobility owner also. And I also use shared systems. So I think this gets into the theme of we want micromobility to be a legitimate transportation option. So, I think that we'll have a overlap in that area. Is I'm not going to say no, you shouldn't own a personal device, and no, you should only use shared micromobility. I think they can complement each other. We often see people try an e-bike in a shared system and they're like, I gotta have one of these, and they buy one. And so I think the programs can complement each other. And to Nick's point is getting more people on bike trails, on bike paths, increased demand for those spaces, hopefully will lead to additional infrastructure. Hopefully it'll lead to additional funding to support micromobility.
I'd love to continue on Laura's point. I think it's a yes and from our perspective, we're looking at e-bikes as solutions to problems. So I think it comes down to what problem are you trying to solve? And I think, we generally want to make e-bikes more accessible to people, but when you're looking at like state or regional program investments, it's really going to look different, right? Like a rural community in eastern Colorado is going to look very different than what we're trying to solve in the Denver metropolitan area. And so I think having that adaptability and flexibility, one of our community grant programs that applied for the Colorado Energy Office was actually proposing putting forth the option for people to either take a personal e-bike ownership incentive or to get some discounts and basically like free access to e-bike shares in their community so that the individual can decide what's going to work better for them. And I saw some of our questions were really around like access to charging and storage infrastructure. So if I live in a walk-up apartment and I don't have somewhere that's easy for me to charge and store my e-bike, access to shared mobility is going to be a really great solution for me. So I think it's looking at the context, what problem are you trying to solve, and then recognize that doing it at scale hopefully drives bigger investments in creating safer places to ride and to charge and store your bike.
I want to follow up on a little bit of this too, and we've actually got a question right now that's I think a really great example is what would be better, spending 10 million on bike lanes or 10 million on e-bike incentives? And I would encourage anyone who's looking at those sort of questions to look at the scale of the public investment that we all make in auto infrastructure, right? We have in Portland, Oregon right now, $20 million of federal money plus some local investment going to fix one street in the next few years. And I'm not saying we shouldn't make that investment, but in terms of the effectiveness of us spending these monies, and let's all remember this is our money we're spending, it is so much more effective to spend it on the trifecta of public transportation, including micromobility infrastructure for shared micromobility, the on-street and separated path improvements, and investment in individual purchase rebates. We can do all of this and maybe just not buy another lane for a freeway, right? And save money in the offing, right? This is not a hard thing. So sorry to get a little forceful there, but I really hate the idea that this is an either or. It's an all three, and it's the cheapest thing we can do as a society.
Awesome. Thank you, Nick. I appreciate that. I appreciate everyone's answers. I got another one here teed up for the three of you. So what needs to be done to elevate micromobility as a mode of transportation, not an alternative mode of transportation? And what are we doing to ensure that the systems we work with acknowledge that?
I'm going to jump in. So I think we have to, in every breath we take, make sure when we talk about transportation, we're talking about everybody who needs to get from one place to another. And our culture and language has just been so auto-centric. And we see this, like we need to move freight and we need to move cars. And it just historically has excluded people who don't have access to a car, people who need to rely on walking, biking, taking transit to get where they need to go. So we've seen this disproportionate investment in car-centric transportation, but transportation by definition is everyone who needs to get from one place to another. And so we just need to all use the right language and make sure that we're really pushing people who are making decisions about transportation to be able to answer the question, how is this decision benefiting people who don't have access to a car? How is this decision addressing our pressing climate emergency? Hold them accountable for their definition of transportation if it doesn't include everybody. And for me, when you do that, you will start to see, as Nick pointed out, the $10 million towards roads are going to start going in towards people who need access to transit, walking, and biking. And we just need to hold accountability and change the definition that people inherently assume transportation means cars. So that's how you get it done. Just keep holding them accountable.
Thank you, Rachel.
I think I love this question, and I think we could probably spend all the time talking about just this specific conversation. And I think building on Rachel's points of making micromobility a a transportation mode, a choice, expanding our options for moving people around. I love how previously, Rachel, you framed it about solving problems. We are amidst a climate crisis. We are struggling for funding. Where so I think taking a look at that and really thinking about how we're using our funding, how we're using our resources, because these options are less expensive. Not saying that we should eliminate all the other choices, but let's make micromobility a choice. Let's have it in the future of our planning, of our sustainability plans.
Great. Thank you, Laura. Nick, I'm going to give you a chance to provide an answer as well before we close it up.
I guess really I just echo what Laura and Rachel said, is that we just need to show up, right? We need to hold people accountable. And that can be as little as, adding your name to I support this initiative, I support this program, to writing a letter to your state representative, to your local council person, right? This is an engagement thing that really needs to happen at a grassroots level to show our elected officials that everyone is serious about this. We know there's this latent demand, but it needs to show up in more than just people stepping up to say, yes, I would like to take advantage of this rebate. As much as we love those, we also need those same folks to voice their desire for more on-street infrastructure, or to support shared micromobility, right? Again, this is not an either or thing. So whenever any of these things come up in your communities or in your states, or honestly on the federal level, voice your support, please.
Well said, Nick. Thank you so much. Laura, Nick, Rachel, thank you so much for being our panelists today. I also want to say thank you to our audience for joining us. I'm going to pass it over to Simbi so she can go ahead and close us out.
Yeah, thank you all so much, Laura, Nick, Rachel, Adrian. Thanks for leading and moderating this panel. And thanks for an engaging panel on this Valentine's Day. So we look forward to seeing you all for our next webinar on March 14th, Tuesday, for State Transportation Electrification Strategies Best Practices, where our speakers will provide best practices for planners and developers to incorporate clean transportation into their planning. We will be discussing EV deployment and adoption strategies. Please stay tuned, and we will catch you on March 14th. Thank you all and have a great day.